Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Summer Fundraising. My name is Vanessa Chase Lakshan, and I'm here this week with Jenny Mitchell, and I'm really excited to be here today for a great conversation about fundraiser mindset. I think it's going to be a wonderful and hopefully very insightful conversation too. So for those of you who are following along with us here on Crowdcast, welcome and thanks so much for joining us. We've got the chat box going, so if you're tuning in, we'd love for you to say hello and introduce yourself. It's always great to see who's listening in with us. And if you're over on Facebook Live watching, welcome and hello. And if you'd like to join us over on our conversation in Crowdcast, you can go to crowdcast.io/Vanessa E. Chase, and you'll find a listing for this event there. And if you're listening along and you're enjoying what we have to say, we'd love for you to share this with your friends. Just below this video feed, you'll see a little share button, so you can click that and share this video on social media. So what is Summer Fundraising? This is a weekly live broadcast that I do. I invite guests from around the fundraising and nonprofit sector to join us for interesting and inspirational conversations about fundraising that can help you this year. I know the summertime can sometimes be a little bit of a slower time for folks, and we're hoping that this series will be inspirational and help you get some momentum and think creatively about your work. And I'm hoping that this conversation will do just that. So without further ado, I want to introduce our guest, Jenny Mitchell. And Jenny, I'm just going to read your bio since I don't have it memorized. So Jenny helps nonprofit leaders change the world one mission at a time. Trained as a classical musician, Jenny brings her creative approach to the world of not-for-profits. Jenny is a sought-after speaker and facilitator. She's presented keynote speeches, led workshops and retreats, and driven double-digit growth for leadership teams across North America. Jenny's patented fundraising mastermind program creates transformational change within leaders and their organizations. Jenny is a fellow Canadian and also lives in Ottawa, Ontario, with her 2 ringette-playing daughters and her hockey-loving husband. Welcome, Jenny.
It's my pleasure. Really looking forward to this.
Yeah, so great to have you here. And you and I have kind of known each other as acquaintances, I guess, for the last couple of years. So it's great to have you here to have this conversation. So you had suggested when we first started talking about this episode, you wanted to talk about fundraising mindset. And I know a lot of people might know what that means, but I thought maybe a good place to start is to just have you explain, what do we mean when we say mindset? And why is that important for us as fundraisers?
Great. So it came out of my work teaching content. And what I mean by that is I teach major gifts. I've worked with fundraising fundamentals folks, getting them on the great path for fundraising. And I kept coming up against this barrier, Vanessa. It was like I could teach them the content, but actually getting the mindset to make things happen, to create that change, was something that I was stumbling about. And I came to the conclusion that, and I talk about this a lot in my training, is the only thing you can 100% control at work is your mindset. You can't control that the toilet's going to overflow. You can't control that your programming person is going to come at you sideways with XYZ. This is what happens in our world. So when the content is great, major gifts, all those kinds of important things, but the context is just as important, Vanessa, right? So making sure that when you show up at work, you know what your priorities are. You know what you need to do to be successful, get your focus for the day. And the other stuff happens anyway, right? The toilet's still going to overflow, but you're going to have a little bit more control over what those key priorities are and how you want to show up as a professional fundraiser at work.
I love that, because you're right. There are so many factors and variables in our work, right? And some of them are in our control, and a large portion are not. And so it's great to be thinking about what are those things and what can we do to kind of cultivate them and develop our own sort of skill set around that.
You bet.
Yeah.
I think it's really underestimated that, and you say this a lot, I love the way you say it, we're people first and we're fundraisers second. So getting ourselves ready to work, whether that means, I always talk about, actionable things, whether that for you, that's an extra half hour in the morning, getting up earlier, taking the dog for the walk, that's one of mine, going for a swim, having some space in order to be ready to work. I think that's really important. And the act of choosing that, Vanessa, is really important, right? Because I think a lot of the speak in our sector around and I talk a lot about not-for-profit martyrs. I talk a lot about the challenges. The one part we can do is we can choose, right, how we show up and how we want to behave, act, and lead at work. So that's kind of my approach. The content follows, but how we show up is incredibly important, and that starts with who we are as people.
So true. And I saw Heather just shared in the chat box that she said she also really loves the space during the day and not allowing herself to feel guilty for that. So true. So I totally have boundary issues around that, where sometimes I'm like, well, I should be working, or there's other stuff I could be doing. But I know that when I take a break or do things that can help me kind of positively cultivate my attitude towards work and my life, I'm always so much better off.
Yeah, absolutely. I've started with, I'll show you my little notebook. I have a favorite notebook, and I know you're a big stationery person too. Because I'm a doer, Vanessa, and those of you on the call that are doers and have trouble sitting still, okay, this might be a technique that you can use. Is I tend to go and use my notebook and move away from my computer and sit quietly to think about things. I'm also a doodler. I'm very creative. You mentioned that in my bio. So sometimes I'll draw things, or I'll picture out on doodles what the steps are for my next email campaign, what the strategies are for my XYZ, and it helps me stay in the moment rather than in that should category. You guys know about the should category, right? I should do this, and I should do that too.
Can take over.
Oh God. Attack of the killer shoulds.
Yeah. I do something similar as well, where I also use a notebook. I use a paper planner, and often I just find getting away from my computer screen and getting away from some of those distractions just helps you get so much clearer and be able to just focus on some of those really important things, rather than, dealing with pop-up notifications and all sorts of other things that can come up on your computer.
Yeah. It's epidemic, right? And again, that idea of choice, we can choose to let it happen to us, or we can find strategies, which is what you found, to address it, right? That I'd like to pick up maybe also on that idea of professionalism and that idea of space. Heather's writing about space here in the chat. I love that. This idea of just judger versus learner. I want to throw this out here as sort of a kernel for today. The judger is the person that says, what's wrong, right? We go into mindset of panic mode, right? Who's to blame? How can I prove that I'm right? All those sort of controlling, and I'm a work in progress too, folks on the call, but those immediate sort of panic mode buttons around they're attacking me versus the learner approach, which I'm working really hard to cultivate. I've been working on a personal level, professionally. I believe that great leaders adopt a learner mindset, and that's the idea of, instead of what's wrong, we ask the question, what's working? Or rather than who's to blame, what's my part in this? How do I want to show up in this? And what's, why is, I use this example too, why is that person so incredibly frustrating? Do you know there's that one person on your team that just makes you want to pull your hair out, right? And I love the learner mindset is, wow, how is that person feeling, right? How can I support them? What's their minds? How can I reach out to them? To me, that mindset approach of adopting a learner mindset, judger versus learner, has really transformed, actually, I'd say my work. For sure, I'm a professional coach by nature, so that's open-ended questions are my game. But I can actually speak personally, it's worked really well with my kids. I walk into the kitchen and it's like the bomb went off because they're home for a vacation and they've made 5 different recipes, all between 9 and 10:30. Instead of like the immediate kind of judger piece, I go, interesting. How can I motivate them to be part of the solution on cleaning this up? It's really helped me. So.
I love that. It's such a small shift in like perspective and mindset. And it also strikes me that it's a much more kind of like compassionate and empathetic approach, right? So understanding where someone else is coming from. And I feel like as soon as you plug into that empathy, a lot of times in relationships, it really kind of breaks down those judgments that you carry into those conversations.
Beautiful. Yeah. It's like empathy as like a little bubble, right? So when we have a little bubble around us, we can objectively look at what's coming at us, Vanessa, right?
Yeah. So I want to get back to kind of more of the mindset questions. And I guess one of my big questions for you, and probably one that I think a lot of other folks might have, is, what do you think are some of the biggest mindset stumbling blocks that fundraisers encounter?
Great question. I'm going to do some research on this because it's I would like to validate my theory, so I'm going to have to do a bit more deep dive on it. But when I work with folks in a coaching environment, one of the things I notice is that fundraisers are the glue, right? So they're always mapped onto everybody else's priorities, right? And we basically can't get our work done without influence, right? Without bringing people along. We're the cheerleaders. And so one of the stumbling blocks, if you will, is this mindset that I have to accommodate everyone. I must make sure that everybody's included. And I'm, while spending a lot of energy and time on maybe some activities that are not quite in your core bandwagon or your core deliverables at work. And I do think that's one of the mindset traps we get into, is thinking that that we can't own our space. And I use the term chief visionary officer, this idea that we can control how I've talked about showing up at work, but you are actually your most valuable asset, right? And I think we're uncomfortable as fundraisers talking about that in a pride way. I like to tie it more into the mission, right? If I'm successful as a fundraiser, I know I raise more money, which has more impact. And using that as my fuel to understand, to own my space at work, so that I can have the right mindset to be successful.
That's so interesting. It's just this whole concept of, kind of owning your space and having boundaries. Really, it kind of sounds to me like being able to establish boundaries is maybe the more practical side of that, in addition to the mindset piece, right?
Sure. And so what language do you need with those boundary settings? So if you tell me you need to work less, I'll be like, yeah, right. But if you tell me that by working less, I can be more productive, that's a mindset shift. If you tell me that this is one of my personal ones, when I say yes to something after 5 o'clock, I say no to my family. That's a mindset shift, right? So I need a carrot. Those of you on the call, maybe you can put in the chat some of the carrots that you use, right? You might use exercise as a carrot. You might use a really great restaurant as a carrot, right? When I'm done X, I will do Y. It all speaks back, Vanessa, to that idea of choice, right? That you get a chance to control and be master of your own domain. So that nasty report that you have to write, maybe I'll have those. When I'm done, I'm going to do Y.
I know for me, oftentimes one of the carrots I use is time to just read and enjoy a really good book. That always just feels so luxurious, and the ability to just have downtime to do that is so nice.
Oh, that's great. And being, the world is full of this idea of self-care. I'm not sure that's a term that rolls off my tongue comfortably, but that idea of checking in with yourself and owning and sort of having a look at your mindset. Like, there's some days when you're going to get to work and you're like, are we Friday yet, right? That's just part of our human nature. We all go through those cycles in our bodies, but that's probably a great day to hunker down, clean up your desk, do some admin, get some systems in place. But there are other days when you come in and you're feeling like $1 million, you've had a wonderful weekend, you're feeling refreshed. Those are the days to get on the phone, to do some outreach, right? Engage. So trusting that, asking yourself, how am I feeling, is part of the litmus test for your mindset as well.
For sure. And I think I noticed that a lot too when I was doing more major gifts work, was, the ebb and flow, and being able to identify, am I having a good day? Am I feeling resilient and energetic? Is this a good day for me to get on the phone where I'll be attentive and able to have conversations with people? Whereas if I'm feeling low energy and maybe just not in the right headspace for it, those calls are never as productive as they will be when I'm, in the right space for that.
Yeah, for sure.
So what are some other mindset blocks do you think are pretty common besides that one?
Well, I'm just thinking, there's stumbling blocks I see is this idea. I'm going to bring up a couple things that I've been working on. I call it hashtag GEFN.
Okay.
So let's see in the chat if anybody can figure out what hashtag GEFN is. And I'll start giving words into it so you guys can play along with me. The first word is good.
Okay.
Second word is enough. And we'll leave it there. See if you guys can find it. GEFN. The idea that I know that I'm looking at these. For now, way to go, Casey. You win. Yes, Bridget, right on. So hashtag GEFN, and you can make this part of your team culture, actually. This mindset that we have to have things perfect before we send them out. before we put them out. And that can be a real stumbling block for different kinds of personalities. I think we also have to acknowledge that for people that don't have that stumbling block, if you're their boss, it can also be a real challenge.
Right. Yeah.
So I like to think of the mindset is I want to show up with an open, and I use the word iterative mindset. The idea that I'm trying things out, right? I'm testing things out. I don't know all the answers, right? I know that I know my path. I know where I want to go,
Right.
and I'm looking for the iterative approach to that. And each time what does Andre Agassi, I'm a big tennis player, so Heather, maybe you can appreciate this one. Andre Agassi used to say every time he went on the court, I either win or I learn something.
Oh, I love that. That's such a good mindset.
So if we can, if we can have that mindset, right? Wouldn't that transform the way we go at strategic planning or donor communications and things, saying I don't have the perfect answer. I'm not #perfectionist, but I'm good enough for now, and I'm confident in what I own and what I know.
For sure. Yeah, I have a very similar, my husband and I actually use a similar acronym, but we call it GETMO, which is good enough to move on.
I love it.
Which we picked up from one of our friends who says that all the time about just life stuff. And I always use that too in my business and in fundraising campaigns, because I think especially being kind of more of a recovering perfectionist myself, there is such a tendency sometimes to get stuck in like continuing to refine things and perfect things. And it can be an endless process, right? And you're right. I think the much better approach is like having that kind of mindset of being able to just do it and learn from it. And, even if it's not as successful as you think it'll be, or maybe it'll meet the goals, you learn stuff from that you can take into future campaigns and future projects, which is always valuable.
Yeah, I love that. And that you're growing. Each time you do that, you're growing, right, guys? And you're learning from that and having the space to do that. And I do believe, too, when it comes to strategy stuff, I'm just picking up on mindset and strategy for those of you that are, it's so hard. I call it putting on my worker bee hat, right? And those of you on the call that are knee deep in the latest fundraising campaign, planning the next event, building your fundraising plan for next year, all those pieces of nitty gritty, it's so easy to get caught in the worker bee hat. Right. And so for me, putting on the strategic or in my case, the business owner hat, or in your case, the chief visionary officer hat, right? Where is my department going? What's my role in this? How can I be a change maker? If you're not the person in charge of the department, how can I be a proactive change maker? Those are really exciting things for me. And that happens when you have space to think about it.
So true. Wow, this is great, Jenny. I feel like I'm learning so much from you on this call. It seems like other folks are taking this away too. Yeah, Heather said that your #GEFN is a huge takeaway for her, which is great. So I have one more question for you, and we'd love to answer questions from all of you who are tuning in. So if you're listening in and you have a question for Jenny or myself, feel free to send that in the chat box, and we'll get to those here in the next couple of minutes. But my last question for you, Jenny, is what do you think fundraisers and even people in leadership can do to cultivate this kind of mindset for themselves?
Wow. And it does come from the top, right? Right, Vanessa? So how your behavior is mirrored will be how you choose to behave. By definition, our sector is risk averse. Our sector doesn't like change. We're convoluted. Often I use that word a lot, right? We're complicated, right? It's not as easy as in the corporate world. And I always say that's because in the corporate world, it's very simple what the goal is: to generate revenue, money for shareholders, right? Sales, or whatever you want to call that. And so they don't have some of the more nuanced pieces that we have. We have multiple goals, and absolutely generating fundraising revenue is one of our goals, but also delivering quality programs, making sure that the people that we're serving are truly being helped and supported. Sometimes that requires a programming rejig. So there's a lot more complexity, and also we have, if you're working for a board of 9 to 11 or 15 people that all have different opinions. They're humans. So why I bring up that context piece is, what can we do as leaders? I think we can believe in the people in our sector, and it starts with us, right? Vanessa, some of the work you've been doing with supporting women leaders, for example, it starts with us. And I don't mean that in a gender approach, but from a leadership approach. Those of you on the call that have people that work for you, allowing the space for them to thrive and survive and come and check with you, but not rescuing them. Right? Do you know what I mean by rescuing them, taking away all their power, right? Sometimes a failed fundraising campaign is the best medicine for success. And it really does change your mindset because you have a chance to control that. You have a chance to try again. I think that's really important. I also think for leaders, I really talk about that learner mindset for leaders to be a way more, it takes a lot more effort to be elastic and dynamic, right? Than it does to be rigid and specific. So people that are, even within an Excel spreadsheet world, I want to qualify that I truly believe in plans. I'm a huge planner, in my own way, but that strategy piece has to be a bit more of a moving target, right? So that aspect of, this isn't working, how can we rejig that? And to me, that's a leader's role to model that behavior for sure, Vanessa.
Yeah.
And showing, I'll just finish with one more thing, is taking holidays. Taking time away, trusting that their team can handle it, right?
Yeah. What are some books and resources you would recommend on this for folks?
Oh, I could go on and on. Okay.
Probably a lot.
Let's see. So I have read and reread recently the Brené Brown books on resilience.
Those are great.
I actually think that they're written for fundraisers. I really do. So if you don't know her stuff, she talks about resilience. 3 things for resilience. Number 1, I know the path I'm on. Number 2, I may not know the direction I'm going, but I have a community around me that can help me find it. And I think that's what you're doing with these crowdcasts, Vanessa, right?
Sure.
Building community to help people, support people. And number 3 is, and that's the mindset, I have the confidence in myself that I'll find the solution.
Yeah.
Right? That's the resilience piece. So Brené Brown's right up there. Vanessa, if you're typing in the chat, you could put up The Gifts of Imperfection. That's a wonderful one of her first ones.
That's a good book.
What else have I been reading lately? It's a great one, and it wouldn't be one you would think of, but it's really great for leadership, is What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And it's a Marshall Goldsmith book about leadership. And it's what I love about it, it sort of talks about all the things that you brought you to that senior position about, or, all the skills that you have, guys on the call, all the abilities and MailChimp and the abilities to have major gifts conversations and write stories and all that great stuff, be communicators. Those bring you so far. The next step is that learner piece where you can start to adapt and grow, because everybody has those skills, right? It's about how you can encompass those skills. And to me, that is partly mindset, is I'm not scared of this. I'm leaning into this. I want to find out more about this. I want to get uncomfortable.
Yeah. That's a really great book, and one I've read a couple of times in the last few years, because it's such a powerful message, which is that, if you keep doing the same things over and over again, which, a lot of organizations will do because it's successful and it's sustaining their success, it's not necessarily going to grow you in the ways that you want to grow. And it's so important to challenge what those sort of conventions or traditions are around your operations and your planning and execution, to think about, where are the opportunities to grow and how can that kind of transform our organizations more. Yeah.
He speaks a little bit to assumptions too, all the assumptions we make about other people. And change starts with us, right, guys?
So true.
Change starts with us.
Have you read Carol Dweck's book, Mindset?
I have not read that one. I read one on mindfulness.
Okay.
So I'm going to write that one down, actually. That's great. If you could put that in the chat, that'd be super.
I'm just gonna
How do you spell Dweck?
I think it's DWECK.
Okay.
I might be off by a letter or 2. That's pretty close. I'm just looking at my bookshelf to see the other ones I've really enjoyed reading. I feel like this one's a little bit more under the radar. It's definitely more of a nonprofit book, but it's called the XYZ Factor, and it's written by Nancy Lubin, who was the founder of Dress for Success and the CEO of DoSomething.org for many, many years. And she talks about leadership and culture for like the next generation of nonprofit employees, which I thought was really interesting. And it's very much a case study about DoSomething.org and their kind of culture as an organization and their success engaging millennials and what's the generation beneath them? I don't even know what the name is now.
New name.
I know.
Yeah.
There's probably a technical term. But anyway, she does a really wonderful job talking about leadership and engagement and some of the mindset that comes with being an organization that's working with, like, at that time, not kind of the typical demographic. Yeah.
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 Motivating people, building teams. I talked about the glue, fundraiser glue. That is so at the core of our being, right, as fundraisers, that collaborative aspect. So I think we're well positioned to step into some of those leadership roles. We have to be able to speak the language that's the traditional language, which is the Excel spreadsheets, the MBA speak and all that. For me, those are actually complementary rather than contrasting.
Yes.
And I think that I actually think the fundraisers are one of the best positioned to work with millennials because of our collaborative nature, because of our sort of questioning environment that we create, at least the people that I work with. I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. So I haven't seen any questions.
Yet. Let's put it out there.
Yeah. So folks who are listening in want to send in any questions or even key takeaways, things that you've heard us talk about today that you're really enjoying. We'd love to hear from you. I saw Heather shared that she really thinks her community is an important part of her resilience. And I love that. I think that's, one of definitely the factors that really helps us out in our careers. And I was saying to someone the other day that I feel like no one in fundraising is an island. Even if you work at a small shop, like you really got to have your people around you that you can go to, who get what you do for a living, who you can lean on, who you can brainstorm with, who can provide you with mentorship, even if it's just, informal, pure mentorship. Having that to kind of like insulate you during those tough times, even the good ones, is such an important factor, I think, for people feeling resilient and like they're well resourced, right?
I always make it's the three head question. When you wake up, I'll address Karen's question in a minute too, but when you wake up and you feel like you're the person in the office with three heads, everybody's looking at you like this, that's when you need to reach out to your fundraiser buddies, right?
So true.
Am I crazy?
That's a good litmus test for that.
Because they're not from the same world, right? Like I do think that's one of the challenges we have, and that's why I really think that mindset of learning their language and being able to speak up and down is really important as we grow. And our leadership suites need us. They really need us. They need our sort of, I always call it our east-west brain, all those synapses that go across, right? We need all of that, those great skills to raise more money.
Yeah, that's very true. So I said Karen had a great question, and maybe this is a good one to wrap up with. She asked if we had suggestions for finding a good mentor. What do you think, Jenny?
Love it. So I think the term mentor is changing. I think that the way we think of mentorship in the past, it was a heavy relationship between somebody older, somebody younger, and there was expectations and weight around it, Karen. I don't see that as a sustainable model with our busy worlds and lives. I think that a great place to find a mentor would be through some of your professional groups, but I might find one way I would do it is rather than going up to them and saying, would you be my mentor, right? Which I think feels heavy and we're already overstrapped. I would suggest that just like volunteers even, you kind of frame it as, here's some specific things I'm thinking about or that I'd like to be working on. And I wondered if you were interested in exploring those with me. The kind of time commitment I'm talking about is, I'll come to you, right, at your place of work maybe, or a coffee date or whatever. Often we pick mentors who have jobs that we'd like, right, guys, right, Karen? So finding a way to accommodate them but yet still get something out of it for you, and sort of giving them a sense of expectations. That's the way I think you might be most successful finding a mentor. It's not to find a mentor to solve the problems, but rather find a mentor to have another perspective to bounce ideas off of. Does that help? How about you? How do you find mentors, Vanessa?
Oh, that's a good question. It's interesting you said it's kind of like the nature of like what mentorship is kind of changing, because I really feel like I've noticed that in the last few years. I was thinking about just, the relationships I have with other women in business and also women in fundraising. And I was really surprised to think about a couple months ago, just how many mentorship, informal mentorship relationships I have with other people in the industry. Where we meet for coffee or we talk on the phone every so often and just talk shop. So there is kind of an informal nature to it. And I think as soon as people start to kind of like put the label on it, you're right, it does make it very heavy. And then you're like, oh, like, am I doing this right? Have I figured it out? Like there's this kind of added level of pressure. But I think if you're just more in the business of making friends with people who you're interested in, who you think could help you, who you think you could maybe help, I think you kind of naturally and organically find those relationships and those people. I've had really good success through a conference that I've gone to a couple of times. At the end of the conference, they set up a peer mentorship program for the 6 months after the conference. And
Cool.
basically, you get paired with someone who is also there, and you have a phone call once a month just to check in, talk about how things are going, kind of post-conference, life, work, all of that. So having the kind of those peer mentorship relationships, I think is really great too, because it means that you and the mentor are on kind of the same playing field. It's not like you found someone who's like a light years ahead of you, or you think is, significantly better than you somehow. But I think kind of making that equal kind of takes some of that pressure off too. It makes it easier for you to feel like you have something to offer them, and, in return, they can also help you as well.
Yeah. Bridget mentioned that in her quotes too, in her comment there. And I want to pick up, I saw Bridget had a question about GEF, and I have to answer it because she's a fellow classical musician.
Oh, sure.
It's never done as a classical musician, right? That's part of our story, because we're always aiming for Bach's rendition of Bach, for example. Sometimes I'll start by saying, I'll know that I'm done when, right? So when I do a first pass, right? Or I'll say it out loud before I start, I'll know I'm done when. Just trying to find, getting a chance to set your limits, Bridget, that would be one of the suggestions I'd have for you. And I welcome other people. She's saying she could spare in both ways of setting limits, but wondered what works for you or others. That works really well for me. I'll often set my timer too. So I'm going to do a 25-minute on my iPhone of this draft of this XYZ, and then I'm going to let it go. I'm just going to step up and I'm going to let it go. So.
Yeah, I think for me, having deadlines is one way that I can kind of make sure that I am moving forward with things, and having some public accountability sometimes, like telling people who are not working on the same projects as me what's happening, so they can be like, hey, did you do that thing that you told me you were going to do? And I can be like, oh, yes, I got that done, or no, I haven't. They could be like, well, why haven't you? And we can talk about it or whatever. I find that that's often helpful, being able to have that kind of accountability for sure.
Maybe we can put some of that in the storytelling, your storytelling Facebook group, and a bit of accountability. We could use that there.
Yeah, for sure. And we actually do that on Mondays. People will post their priorities, which is always really fun. We'll talk about what they're up to for the week. So Jenny, this has been such a wonderful conversation. I've really enjoyed having you on Summer Fundraising this week. And I wanted just to give you an opportunity before we wrap up this episode to tell people where they can find you online.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. So actually, the one place we can continue this conversation about mindset specifically is if you go on Facebook and hashtag Fundraising Mojo. That's what I really talk a lot about in my Facebook group, hashtag Fundraising Mojo, all one word. You can join that conversation there. You can also reach me through my website, which is chavender.com. I'll spell it because it's actually not as hard as it sounds. It's like lavender, but with a CH at the beginning, chavender.com. I'd be delighted to continue the conversation, especially because it's funny, Vanessa, I've actually built my business model around this idea of mindset, in the sense of my mastermind programs are peer groups of between 4 and 8 people. They have that accountability piece to them, because I found that those are the places we can teach content until we're blue in the face, right? Storytelling, for example, but having that context of accountability, making, getting people organized, getting people started, having the confidence to know that what you have to share through that story is important and deserves to be seen. Those are all those mindset pieces that are so effectively done through peer support groups, just like this one.
For sure. That's great. Well, thank you so much for sharing those resources, Jenny. And I also want to let you all know, I also have a Facebook group as well, where usually we talk about the episodes of Summer Fundraising afterwards. So you can find us over at the Storytelling Nonprofit Lounge on Facebook. It's a closed group right now, but you can send me a request and we'll definitely add you. And also, just to let you know, we've got another episode of Summer Fundraising coming up the same time next Tuesday. My friend Preeti Gill, who is a wonderful and outstanding prospect researcher based out of Vancouver, will be joining me to talk about her research on women's philanthropy and some of the research she's done around diversity in giving. So it'll be a really interesting conversation. So thank you, everyone, so much for joining us. Thank you so much to Jenny. Really appreciate your time and expertise here, and hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, everyone. Take care.
Bye.